Alright folks, welcome back to Callahan's Garage. My name is Callahan and today we are entering phase 2 of our heater channel install on David's Beetle. So in the last video we took the doors off, we braced our whole body up in preparation for cutting out our heater channels, and that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Hey, I'm Callahan. Welcome to Callahan's Garage.
So in our last video, we did all of the bracing on our body here in preparation for cutting out our heater channel. So if you haven't seen that, please go check it out. That is a crucial first step in our heater channel replacement. It's not something you want to skip. So the first step is kind of up in the air, really depends on the condition of the car, kind of like we talked about in the last video. And a lot of people's first instinct is to just start cutting metal, and that's, all well and good. But there is one thing we want to think about. And that's, are there any areas on the car that we can fix before we cut out the heater channels that's going to make putting the heater channels back in easier? And there's a couple of areas that we really want to look at when we're talking about that. So there's a couple of main areas we want to think about, and that's our lower quarters, both on the rear and the front of the car. So, these are big, smooth areas that rust out very commonly, and they're also attached directly to the outside of our heater channel. So, if this area is rusted out, then we don't have anything to attach our new heater channel to. Same thing in the front quarter. If that area is rusted out, we're not going to have any solid metal there to attach our new heater channel to. So this is a very simple area that we can repair before we repair the heater channel, and that's going to give us something to attach our new heater channel to. What we don't want to do is go cutting everything out and then throw our heater channel up in here, and then all of a sudden we don't have anything to weld it to. That's what's going to keep all the car together, is being able to weld that heater channel in. So, making a repair like this, very quick, relatively easy, straightforward repair. We can do this with our door still welded in place, so we have the bottom of that door to reference for the bottom of our quarter. We don't necessarily have to weld the bottom of this to anything because we're going to be cutting that heater channel out anyway, so you can hold off on that. But we can get this whole quarter section, pretty much welded in, and then that's going to give us a nice solid substrate to attach our new heater channel to. Then the exact same scenario in the front quarter, this footwell area, very common area to rust out. Relatively straightforward, quick repair, just basically just a flat piece of metal. You can buy donor pieces for this. So really easy area to repair before we go sticking our new heater channels in. And again, that gives us something really nice and solid to weld to that's going to hold that new heater channel in. And the next real area we want to think about is just the inside of our B-pillar here. So this is, again, a very simple area to repair. With the old heater channel in, even if this area is completely rusted out, it's a relatively straightforward, simple area to fix up, because we also have a seam weld, all the way around the bottom of this B-pillar to our new heater channel. So, these couple of areas, very easy to do without any existing heater channel. If these areas are completely rusted out, they're not very hard to piece back together, with very little dimensions or measurements. We can use our door as a reference point. We have our A-pillar and our firewall as a reference point for the front quarter. We've got, the other side, we got a couple of things we can use to put this back together, very straightforward. And again, that gives us really good substrate to weld our new heater channel to. So then there are also a couple of areas, that a lot of times we'll have to repair in conjunction with our heater channels, but you may not want to be doing these before you do the heater channels. So for example, along the inside of our rear quarter here, especially if your heater channels are in really rough shape, this area on top of the heater channel will be rusted out. That'll have to be repaired. Also, this rear corner right here where that sits down onto our floor pans, that's a very common area. You can see this one's a little rusted out. I'm going to have to fix it up. Also, the front firewall around the inside of the heater channel, a lot of times, those areas are rusted out a little bit as well. So, those areas will have to be fixed in conjunction with the heater channels. But if we do those repairs before we put the new heater channels in, a lot of times, it just won't really match up. So if you don't do those like absolutely perfectly, a lot of times they'll kind of interfere with the new heater channel going in. So, most of the time I'll hold off on those until I get the new heater channel, at least, kind of tacked into place. But, you know, if we've got a lot of work to do, if you're breaking this up over a series of days, you know, getting some metal repaired so that we have something to attach the heater channel to is kind of the first step. So just a couple of things, you know, we want to keep in mind, you know, as we're thinking about how we're going to approach this project. So the last thing I really want to touch on is, you know, a question that somebody had, you know, let's say, for example, you know, the bottom 8 to 10 inches of the car is completely rusted away, you know, completely gone. You know, how do we proceed? Do we just, you know, kind of work our way down, or, you know, start putting pieces together and hope that they fit? You know, how do we approach a scenario like that? And that's kind of what I was getting into before, you know, about, for example, like being able to use our door as our reference point for our rear quarter. You know, there's several things that we can do with basically no reference point, you know, no dimensions, and, you know, just understanding where everything is supposed to be. You know, we can put a few things together. But like when it comes to the heater channels, you know, if we don't have anything to attach it to, if we don't have any reference point, keep in mind, we still have the floor pan, we have the tunnel. And that's one of the reasons I like to do the floor pans and everything but prior to doing the heater channels, you know, especially on a car that's in really poor condition, is because we can still use that as a reference point. So, you know, like in the past, I've run into a scenario where like I just said, you know, the car is just completely obliterated on the bottom half. We have nothing to go off of, but we can use the floor pan. So, you know, basically what we can do is we can take our new heater channels, you know, they bolt to the floor pan. If we bolt them down to the floor pan, they're going to land basically where they need to. In most instances when we're doing something like that, we're also doing those kind of rear cargo areas that also bolt down to the floor pan. We're doing front firewall that also bolts down to the floor pan. So kind of just think about it, you know, if we took the heater channels, those rear luggage tray sections, the front firewall, and we can assemble that on our floor pan, that gives us basically the bottom, you know, 6 to 8 inches of the car. So if we can assemble that and tack it together, we can then take that structure and sit the body down onto it, or, you know, sit it up underneath the body, and then, you know, start to put some of the pieces together. And that makes it a lot easier. You know, when we have that floor pan to use as a reference point, we can get stuff put together in the correct shape without having to have a fancy frame table or, you know, a chart full of dimensions. You know, we can basically just use what we know is right to help us get back to help us get the body back into the shape that it needs to be. All right, so let's quit talking about it. Let's do it. Let's get some metal out of this thing. So a lot of times the first thing I'll do is just chop out this center section of heater channel, get it out of the way. It makes it feel like we've done something, and it gives us a little more room to kind of get in here and start dissecting some more of the car. Don't do that. And that right there is why we brace the car up. Because no matter how many times you've done this, no matter how many times you put a car on a rotisserie, you will forget that you lubed up your rotisserie before you put the car on it, and that thing moves way easier than you remembered it. So, car's fine, car's braced up, we're back upright again. I'm gonna cut some metal out. Jeez Louise. So we've got the center section cut out. Let's take a look at this, and, you know, why doing heater channels can be super important, you know, when you're doing a full restoration. So, you know, like I said before, you know, this car is in relatively good shape. You know, from the surface, it looks like a pretty solid car. We did have some rust, you know, coming through on the bottom side of the heater channels. which you can, you know, kind of piece and patch back together. That's all well and good. But if we take a look at this, you know, like I said before, you know, we've got this kind of outer structure, we've got this bottom plate, and then inside of here, we have this heat tube that all of that heat moves through. And inside of that tube, it's gonna rust. There's gonna be rust in there. You know, there's no treatment on the inside of this metal. And you know, we get moisture and air and dirt and grime and road dust and everything accumulates inside of here, and it just rusts them out over time. You know, even the nicest original cars that are out there, guarantee you they have some surface rust inside of the heater channels, and over time it's gonna come out. You know, so when you're doing a full restoration, you know, a lot of times it's beneficial just to go ahead and do the heater channels. Put some metal in there that has some internal corrosion protection, you know, and it's going to be a much better quality repair down the road. So I'm just going to start at the front of the car and kind of work my way back. Like I said before, we're going to do the entire passenger side first. So we're going to start by getting this front section out. We got the middle section chopped out, nice and easy. But this front section, we got a lot of spot welds we need to find and drill out. So you all along the bottom edge of this front quarter here, we've got spot welds that are kind of doubled up and stacked on each other. We've got to get all of those drilled out. We've got a couple of spot welds on the firewall that weld into the front side of that heater channel. And then we've got a seam weld all the way around that A-pillar. So we got a couple things we need to get out, and I'll show you kind of tricks to do all of that. But first thing, you know, this car has old undercoating in the fender wells. So we need to get all of this cleaned up so we can find those spot welds and get them drilled out. Okay, so we've got enough of our undercoating cleaned off here to find the spot welds, and as you can see, you know, this is just a miserable job. You know, if you have undercoating to clean off, I'm sorry ahead of time. You know, I've spent hours and hours cleaning undercoating as well. It sucks. It's miserable. Just be patient, take your time. You know, it's going to be messy. It's going to sling it everywhere. Just do what you got to do. But the good thing about the undercoating is it really highlights, you know, where all of our spot welds are down through here. So as you can see, you know, we've got a lot of spot welds down through here that we need to get drilled out. And then we've got some on the front side of our firewall here too. And I've seen these done, you know, several different ways. I guess it really just depends on like who was running the spot welder at the factory that day. So for example, you know, on the front of the firewall here, a lot of times you'll just have a couple on the bottom, and then you'll have a couple around that flange on the inside. This one, it's just got continuous spot welds all along the bottom here. So, you know, whoever was on it that day was just really overzealous. So we've got all those to get drilled out. We got all of these to get drilled out. And one of the things people will do, one of the biggest frustrations of drilling spot welds out is people trying to use a spot weld cutter. And in a scenario like this, we don't need to use a spot weld cutter. You know, we are not saving the material behind this. We can just drill straight through these spot welds with a regular drill bit and get this thing out of here. We are trying to save the top piece, not the bottom piece. So drill a hole straight through all these spot welds, and we'll get this thing out of here. So I've just got me like a 1/4 inch drill bit here. I'm gonna just sit here and go through and drill every single one of these out. And that's all we need to do. Just drill straight through that spot weld. Like I said, you know, this heater channel is trash. We're not using it. All we need is to get these two pieces disconnected. So we're gonna drill every single one of these out, and then we'll move on to the A-pillar. Okay, so as you can see, we've got all of our spot welds drilled out now down through here. The next area that's kind of a little challenging is right here at the front of our heater channel, kind of where it meets up to this quarter here. And so this area right here, we have spot welds that go through the quarter, through the heater channel, and then into the inside flange of our firewall here. So these are just stacked up right on top of each other, you know. So over the course of this inch or so, you know, we may have 8 to 10 spot welds, and this can really be frustrating to get apart. So, you know, you can kind of grind through this. You can drill these out in succession, you know, either way. But we only need to go up to about right here, and just so we can get our heater channel out and then we can get our new heater channel in. You don't need to go, you know, way up the inside of the quarter here. And you can see I've got a spot that's a little mangled right here where I had two spot welds really close together and it just kind of chewed that up as I was drilling them out. So once we get the older heater channel out, you know, we'll fix that up real quick before we put the new one back in. Okay, so our next area we're going to look at is inside the car. And I know this has been spray painted black, so I apologize if it's a little hard to see, but we really don't have a lot to look at in here. There is one flange right here that I know is kind of hard to see, but we've got a couple of spot welds on there we need to drill. And then the last real thing is we just need to cut around our A-pillar here. So one of the big mistakes people make when they're cutting around your A-pillar is they will cut the A-pillar. We want to make sure we cut the heater channel so that we can retain all of the material on our A-pillar. So we're basically going to cut around the bottom of this, get our heater channel out of the way, and then we'll come back and we'll clean all this up so we've got a nice clean surface to weld to our new heater channel. So basically all that's holding this now is our old seam sealer in this joint right here, and I've got one little piece of heater channel that I can't quite get my cutoff wheel into. So I'm gonna grab my chisel and see if I can, you know, chisel down through that, and then we can just knock this thing out of the way. Okay, so you can see we've got all of our heater channel out of the way now. The only thing we have left is just a little bit of remnants of that heater channel that's still attached to the bottom of our A-pillar. So the way this A-pillar is attached to the heater channel is we just have a seam weld that runs all the way around the perimeter of our A-pillar. And on the inside here, we've just got a little bit of a flange on the bottom of that A-pillar that sits on top of the heater channel. So basically what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna grind through this weld all the way around. And once I get through that weld, the rest of this heater channel will drop off out of the way. And that'll still leave me as much of this flange as possible to weld to my new heater channel. Okay, so we've got our whole front heater section pulled out. Went, you know, basically as I expected. You know, we've got all of our spot welds drilled out. We got our spot welds on the front firewall drilled out. We did have some rust in that firewall on the inside and the outside of it, you know, so I wasn't super careful taking that apart because I know I'm going to have to do some repair work up there anyway, and you know, that's totally fine. You know, if you get to an area where you know you're going to have to fix it, it's okay to just go ahead and cut it apart because we know we're going to have to come back in and readdress that anyway. So, you know, ran into a little bit of that on the A-pillar. You know, tried to save as much of this A-pillar as I can because it's in pretty good shape. But, you know, once I started cutting on it and grinding on it a little bit, we see that we've got some scale coming through from the outside, from the inside, and some of that outside just kind of crumbled away. So we'll probably have to do a little bit of patchwork, you know, on the very bottom of this A-pillar, and that's totally to be expected. You know, when you're working on a car that's this, you know, this age, you know, even though it may look good from the outside, you know, there's probably some scaly rust working on the inside, and you may find some new areas. And, you know, once you start beating and grinding and hammering on the car, you know, some of that stuff is just going to rear its head through. You know, so don't be surprised if you find a little bit more than you bargained for once you start getting into this. So now we can jump to the back and we'll get that all apart. So our teardown process for the back is basically going to be the same as it was for the front. We've got a series of spot welds along the bottom of this lower quarter here. We're going to cut around the B-pillar, being as conservative as we can, you know, trying to maintain all of the structure in that B-pillar. We've got a few spot welds on the back of the heater channel, and then we've got a few spot welds on the inside that I'll show you. Okay, so we've got all the spot welds on the outside of our rear quarter drilled loose. Now it's time to move inside. So we need to cut around our B-pillar here. So just like we did in the front, we've got a seam weld all the way around this B-pillar, and it actually comes up over the top of our heater tube right here. So we need to cut all the way around this thing. And then we've got a flange right here that also sits down on top of that heater channel that has several spot welds on top of it. Then we also have a flange right here that sits back up against our luggage tray area, and it's got a couple of spot welds. So we need to drill all those out, cut this, and then we should be able to mostly swing that thing down out of the way. Also, keep in mind, this area right here, this is one of the areas on the car that the factory really got trigger happy with the seam sealer. So I've gone ahead and I've chiseled away and ground off and wire wheeled a bunch of this seam sealer loose. But you're gonna have to get in here and clean all this up really well just to be able to find these spot welds. So don't get frustrated with that. It just takes a few minutes, get all of that cleaned off. Okay, so as you can see, we've got our heater channel completely removed on this side. But before we go putting it back together, we do have a few areas we need to address. So this rear section of our heater channel here, this is a little crusty. We need to at the very least get that cleaned up. It looks like we may have a few holes in there, so I'm going to clean that up. We'll decide if we need to fix it or not. And then the inside of our B-pillar came apart a little bit, you know, as we were grinding on it. So like I was saying before, you know, when you start grinding and hammering on this stuff, you know, you can see we've got a few pinholes that opened up on here. So basically I'm just going to chop this off, make us a new little section for down here. And then lastly, same kind of situation on the front of our firewall here. Just got some rust that kind of reared through as we were cleaning all this up. So I'm going to make me a new little firewall section to clean this up. Okay, so before we jump into doing our couple of little repairs, I want to take a look at our old heater channel versus our new heater channel, and talk about, you know, getting these apart and getting these out. So, you know, getting all of this out is difficult. Like, it is not easy to do, you know, so don't get frustrated with it. Just take your time, you know, don't try to do it all at once. If you have to break it up, break it up. You know, one of the biggest headaches is just finding the spot welds, getting them cut out, and then getting your A pillars and your B pillars cut loose. So, you know, looking at the new one, remember we've got our flange on our front that has spot welds. We have spot welds all the way down the inside of that quarter, that front quarter. We have our seam welds around the A pillar. Then if we move to the back, we have our spot welds down the outside of the lower quarter. We have them around that flange on the back. We have them on top of that flange on the inside. And then we have another seam weld around our B-pillar. So, you know, just think through it step by step. Make sure you're not missing anything. It is difficult to especially get this rear section out. So like I said, you know, just take your time. Try not to get frustrated with it. If you need to take a step back, take a step back. The main thing is we don't want to do, you know, any more damage than we have to getting these pieces out, because all that's doing is creating more work for us, you know, down the road. So like I said, you know, take your time, just try to be as surgical and as precise as you can with this. That way we don't just end up creating more work for ourselves. So then I also want to take a minute to acknowledge the mess that is on the floor right now. So, you know, keep in mind, everything that is on the floor that you see right here came out of that heater channel. You know, this is all just road grime and rust and dirt and dust that accumulates, you know, over the course of 50, 60 years and just, you know, rots these cars out from the inside out. You know, so this is the demise of these cars. You know, this is really what kills a Beetle over time. You know, because like I said, there's no corrosion protection on the inside of those heater channels from the factory. There's no way to get in there and clean them out or blow them out or spray some cavity wax or, you know, anything like that in them. So there's no way to, you know, to prevent this once it starts. You know, it's just kind of, it is what it is. So, you know, just keep that in mind. You know, even if you have a very, very nice car, you know, without getting some of this, without doing the heater channels, at some point, you know, they're gonna continue to just rust away from the inside out. So, you know, when you're looking at a car, you know, if you're looking to buy a car, if you're looking for a project car, just keep that in mind. Is, you know, this is inside of every single one of these cars to some degree. Okay, so I'm gonna get these couple little repairs knocked out, and I'll kind of show you guys how I do those, you know, as we progress through them, and then we'll get this thing ready to start putting our new heater channels in. And we can cut it out. And you can see the inside of this is all super crusty still, but we will do that after we get the new heater channel in. Then we can weld it up and then grind it and make it all nice and pretty. So our firewall piece is done. We're gonna knock out the B pillar and the rear section, and then we'll get all this cleaned up. So you can see, like I was talking about, we've got our inner fender piece. I've got it cleaned up and primed. I got my new piece that's gonna go on top of it. I've got a couple of holes to plug weld it to this piece. I've got the back side of it primed. So we'll stick this up in here, we'll weld it in. You can also see I've left this a little longer than it needs to be. The reason I do that is that way, you know, when I put my heater channel up against this, we're gonna have a weld on the bottom side of this, and I wanna make sure that this piece is plenty long enough so that it fits up really nicely and consistently to the bottom of that heater channel. So we'll come back and we'll trim this and we'll clean it up so it fits perfectly up to that heater channel. And then also remember, like we talked about earlier, we've got this inside piece here that we need to fix, but we're not gonna do that until we get the new heater channel installed. Okay, well that's gonna wrap it up for all of our removal and repair and everything that we needed to get done. We are now ready to start fitting up our new heater channel. But we're gonna save that for the next video. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.